And boom, we are live. Welcome to the Preaching Sense Show. My name is Michael Lucky. I'm here with Matt Meiselman. How you doing today, Matt?
Pretty good. Yeah, we're going to call it that for now. And, this is an evolving process. We don't know where we're going to be in a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but we do know we're going to be on here giving NBA betting advice. It's going to be reshaped, I'm sure, somehow, probably many times. But we've got our ratings, we've got our games, big Friday after a quiet Thursday. So, yeah, a lot to get into.
Let's start with that quiet Thursday. It turns out we were all talking about how Paul George was going to sit, and instead, not only did George play, we had Kawhi Leonard from the top ropes coming out of nowhere. How did you end up playing that? Did you get any bets in?
Yeah, I did. It worked out to be very neutral. Yeah, we had also talked about Kawhi being out for like a long time yesterday. I thought he was going to be out another month or something. Either I missed an obvious report or that was really out of nowhere. I'm actually not sure. But Kawhi was not especially great in his return. George had a pretty weak game. So what I ended up having was I had bet Detroit when George was initially listed questionable. And then I ended up hedging it when we got the Kawhi update that he was upgraded to questionable. Because an upgrade from out to questionable almost always means the player
is incredibly
is
optimistic.
Yeah. Like, we went through this, it was last year with Joel Embiid in the series against Miami, where he had the broken bones in his face. And when he went from out to doubtful, I was treating that, and I think
I remember that day. Yeah,
we were treating that as though he was probable, like out to doubtful. Even though he's still listed doubtful, it directionally. It's
and I'm pretty sure he played
playing
that day, and was like played, his 32 minutes or whatever.
Yeah, that was. I mean, I forget what his effectiveness was like. I think they won, but he wasn't his normal self. But whatever. When a player gets upgraded from out to anything, especially in the playoffs, but even during the regular season, we can usually.
I just think why would they do that, right? So it's a clear sign, it's a clear signal of information. I mean, their information is changing. There's changing from what is considered, out is your way of saying 0%, right? Well, doubtful that might be 20%, right? But 20% is 20% more than zero, right? So you get this huge upgrade, and a guy like Joel Embiid swings things so much that you can really capitalize on that.
Yeah, but also I'm not even sure it's 20% in that scenario, because if you went probable to doubtful, we're talking like 1% of the 1%. Time that guy will play. When we go out to doubtful, that guy's playing like 80% of the time. So maybe there's just this like.
I didn't want to overstate that. I gave my floor answer. It was a bare minimum 20%, but definitely I could have made a case for a much larger one there.
Yeah, I think it is a larger one. So maybe it's just this procedural thing that NBA teams have to do where you can only jump up one rung on the status ladder at a time. Yeah, you can only go one notch at a time. So maybe that's what we're seeing. But anyway, yeah, Kawhi, at that point, I was like, all right, he's probably going to play. And George did not get a second update. He was already questionable, so in my head, I thought.
I think we saw you went through shoot around too. Is that?
Yeah,
we saw that, and we might have mentioned that on the show that if he goes through shoot around, I think we're going to have to take that as a optimistic signal.
I forget if we actually did, but that is definitely true regardless. So yes, it was optimism for George, optimism for Leonard, and the projected line at that point was like north of 12. And the actual line had fallen to 8. So I ended up having a very, very tiny middle at 9 that I was rooting for, and it ended up, I think the Clippers won by 5. So
so let's be honest about that situation, right? Like, I have mixed opinions on being on both sides of a bet. I do think there are times when it's appropriate and not appropriate, and the reality is, just like in any form of gambling, you have to make the best decisions at the moment when you're making these decisions, right? So even though Matt had placed bets on the other side, he now received this incredibly large signal of information that shifted the range of outcomes in such a significant way that you actually just have to stop and think, okay, well, now that old bet that I had, it's a separate entity entirely, right? We had a certain amount of information. We made a certain action at the time. Now we have more clarity, so let's make a better decision going forward.
Absolutely, that's well said. So just to put specific numbers on it, with Leonard out of the picture like we thought at the beginning of the day, and George 50-50 to play, we were looking at a projected line of either 11.5 or about 7. and Pistons plus 9.5 would make sense. There was more upside for that than downside because I thought it was a little bit closer to George
I thought
being
you were
out.
more 60-40 out as we were discussing. I think that was a fine way to play it.
So it wasn't a huge bet or anything, but I was leaning towards him being out, and there was a little more upside in that direction. But then when we got the Leonard and George, both optimistic updates, the range of outcomes, I guess the floor there was still 7, but that seemed very unlikely that both guys would be out at that point. And the ceiling there was a projected line of like 12.5, maybe 13, with a median more like 10. Like plus 9.5 just made no sense at that point. But because there was some of that George uncertainty baked in, at that point, if the line were 10...
I don't even know how many minutes Leonard ended up playing.
He played about 20.
Start?
He started, but they limited his minutes. I wasn't too worried about Leonard. It was more the optimistic George update that gave me pause, and the fact that the line had fallen for some reason.
Kawhi takes another bench player off the court, right? So we just had a discussion about how negative a lot of those rotation players were, much to my awareness lacking, that I thought a couple of those guys were a little more positive than they ended up being. And then, I don't care what version of Kawhi is out there, he's going to be quite solid. He might not be the MVP that he once was, but I'm sure he's still going to be the board man and play D and, be good on offense when needed. So,
yeah, Kawhi still has a 3.7 player rating, which is 2 points lower than Paul George, but 3.7 is quite good. And even if he plays half the game,
top 15 probably, right?
Yeah, that's a borderline. Yeah, he's in the top dozen guys in the league, like right on the fringe there. When you scale him for minutes, he's a little worse than that because he's not playing big minutes. But even when you adjust for minutes, he's having an impact of a top 30 player. And as the season progresses and maybe he gets healthier, he can, sort of reemerge as a really top guy. But ultimately, I thought at that point in the day, Clippers -8 was actually a good bet, independent of anything, which is why I made the hedge. I wasn't just trying to get out of a bad bet. I was also like, with the new information, it actually makes sense to have some Clippers -8, -8.5. The game ended up closing at 11.5. But I ended up with an equal-sized bet on both sides, and the only way I was going to win any money is if the Clippers won by exactly 9, which I guess is unfortunate, but, the news changed too quickly. It's kind of hard to manage that sometimes. And then I ended up with some Morris and Reggie props that, were a wash. Like, some of them hit, some of them didn't. So, a lot of effort for no result. Totally even day. With the exception of the Spurs game where it kind of happened quickly. I got a bit unlucky. If anyone else bet it, they probably had the same outcome where the Spurs looked like a good bet when Keldon Johnson got downgraded to questionable, but then wound up playing because we saw the line go from 7 to 8 with Keldon.
I thought Keldon Johnson didn't play yesterday.
He didn't, but he went from questionable to starting to scratched.
Oh, okay, all right. So I was a little bit checked out yesterday, and I was interested in that one, but I do remember on the show we didn't talk about Keldon Johnson. We talked about some the Portland side of that game a little more, but yeah, that was a wild one.
So he wasn't on the injury report in the morning at all. He was supposed to play, no word of any issue with him, then downgraded to questionable, so the point spread went from Sacramento -7 to 8. And then he got upgraded to in, like he was listed in the starting lineup, and then he was late scratched like 5 minutes before tip-off. So at that point it was hard to hedge out or anything, and I just kind of stuck with it, and the Spurs were close for a while but ended up imploding in the fourth quarter. So none of it was really consequential. All the bets were small yesterday. We'll have some bigger ones today. What game do you want to start with?
Hey Matt, one thing before we leave, just to kind of keep a placeholder for future Clippers games. So in Kawhi's game last night, for first game back, only 6 points, he had a plus-minus of plus 26. Paul George was plus 4. So Kawhi's absolutely having such a huge impact, even when he's not scoring and just getting kind of kicking the rust off. So just something to
that's impressive.
Even when we start looking at futures bets too, again, Clippers. I had kind of written Clippers off at some point for being contenders. If Kawhi's back, it's a whole different story.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, Paul George had an uncharacteristically bad game, which kind of plays into some of that. Because Kawhi was staggering minutes with
shooting.
him.
I mean, we can't expect that.
And we thought he might rest because he had such a grueling game, like such a taxing game.
Third out of 4, I think we discussed.
Third out of 4, and the most recent one was that game in Dallas where he played extra minutes. So there was some fatigue for George. But Kawhi's gravity on the court, even if he's not playing that well or shooting that well, like he's taking so much attention from the defense where like Reggie Jackson and Marcus Morris are going to get more open looks. So yeah, I totally agree there. Like without Kawhi, the Clippers are a play-in team. And with Kawhi, they are a borderline 6-7 team with upside for better. I think that's probably where I'd place them. Depending on, just how healthy Kawhi is. If it's last night's version of him, I still think it's kind of like their fringe if they get above the play-in. They should make the playoffs either way with him. But if we get, Kawhi actually starting to play like he used to in the past, and this could emerge as another, they could get back to championship contending status. It was the Pistons. Like, this is, the second worst team in the NBA. So keep that in mind too.
Isaiah Stewart wasn't even in the lineup.
Yeah, and he actually is somewhat important, even though he's not very good. Like, this is a really bad roster. I mean, Jalen Duren and Marvin Bagley and whoever else they played, like, those guys they're young and could have a lot of upside in their careers, but they're not very good right now.
All right. I think that was a great recap of yesterday's tiny 3-game slate. We do have quite a few more games today. We got 3, 6, we got 11 total we're working with. I know there's a few that Matt and I talked about before we got on air. I think I was most interested in...
I'll give you a scroll so you can see here.
Yeah, let's start with Bam again. I think that is it's somewhat straightforward. It's relatively easy. It seems right now the line that is available.
I just want to display the Lakers on screen for a second as a tease, and then I'm going to scroll back out.
Don't worry.
Yeah, okay. This is this is weird. Okay,
we got a dark green on the Lakers line.
Yeah.
What could go wrong?
But it
looks
probably.
like this line right now is pricing Bam out completely.
No, I don't think so.
I'm seeing it as a pick'em. What do you think the line should be with Bam?
Oh, you're talking about what the point spread actually is.
Correct. Yeah, I'm saying the current spread is a pick'em that I'm seeing.
Yep.
Maybe there's a 1 in either direction somewhere, but we think that if Bam plays, Matt, you've got it estimated about a 3-point spread. So Bam is worth about 3 points. I'm not necessarily suggesting getting on Miami right now, but to me, this feels like the upside's all on the Heat. So how are you attacking this game?
So just to quickly clarify where the spread is, I forgot to put an estimate there for Caleb Martin. Let me just do that in real time, really, really quickly. Just a quick check over of Miami's rotation. Okay, you can see it's a bit nonchalant for players at his level because he's not a huge minutes guy and whatever.
Caleb Martin.
Yeah, I guess he is playing pretty big minutes.
He played 38 minutes against the Raptors in the very last game.
Oh, man. So. Well, with Bam out, he's a huge minutes guy for sure. He is a starter. Okay, but yeah, Caleb Martin is only 0.3 rating, and his backups are like -1s or so, -1.5s. So he's like about a point.
So there is a little bit of downside in Miami if Caleb Martin's out.
Yeah, okay. So we've got a potential 4 points, maybe 4.5 with we talked about yesterday, there's a compounding effect with 2 guys on the same team. But okay, for now, Bam is the main focus here. I think we have a line priced at a midpoint. So the projected line is about 4 points off from the current spread. I think the consensus line is like Wizards -1. Most of the sites have Wizards -1. And I've got Heat -3. I don't think that this is because Bam is projected to be out everywhere. I think it's because Bam is projected 50-50, and then the Wizards are overrated by 2 points. So it's a combination of the two. So the books think they're at a midpoint for Bam, but they also are overrating the Wizards, in my opinion. So we've got 2 points of, just the Wizards are, what is their record, 9-7 this year?
They are 8-7 right now.
Yeah, they're not a good team. And the fact that they've had this streak without Bradley Beal is kind of nuts, but I just don't think this is a good team.
Well, I think if Beal was out, this game total would be a lot lower than 217. I think, as you mentioned recently, I think it was on our 2 shows ago, Bam is very important for the total towards the under. So I'm curious if Bam's in, let's just say Martin and Bam are both in, are you interested in under 217.5?
It's hard again because I don't know what the line should be. I don't have a projection for the total. The game.
If you don't have an answer immediately, then I think the answer is no.
Okay, if
it's not an FPS, then it's an F.
Yeah, my gut is more towards the over if he doesn't play. But I don't have a great answer.
Fair enough. Yeah. So he is clearly important on and off, right? So
yeah,
fair enough. So if he's out, that actually, I agree. That would make more sense to at least keep in mind. Maybe we want to play over 217 if Bam is.
Yeah, and I don't have Dwayne Dedmon listed here. He's questionable too. He probably is not a guy who plays a lot of minutes. I mean, he's definitely not playing a lot of Bam is active.
So before the season started, we both went on Twitter and we muted Miami player Novik Jokic.
Nikola Jovic. He's one letter from Jokic.
So he's muted on my timeline because I didn't want to confuse him for Jokic. His name is like one letter off and it looks so similar. But I've not actually watched this guy play. I mean, so let's just real quick. If Dedmon and Bam are both out, Dedmon's a very slow-paced player.
Yeah.
Do we have something here? Can this guy run? He's young. I mean, maybe there's some pace situations here.
He started at center. I have to imagine there's a higher-paced, higher-scoring game with him as the center, and especially if Dedmon's not there to back him up, because that's what we had last game in Toronto, was Jovic and Dedmon both played.
Dedmon's a really slow player, too. That's a fair statement?
I think
like
so.
Comparable to Bam, obviously I'm not saying he's relevant. I'm saying he's a little bit relevant if Bam's out.
He's poor defensively, so that kind of negates some of that in terms of total impact.
I didn't assume that, but
Dedmon's just not good. I'm not sure what his total impact though is, honestly, but he's a big guy, so I think he kind of has to.
I was
slow
assuming
the
he was
down.
A plus defender. That was the only way he would be on the court. But if that's an assumption, I'm getting wrong, and that is a fair point.
I mean, I'm just going by the ratings here because I've not watched a lot of Dedmon.
Obviously understood. We're just guys with spreadsheets trying to pretend like we know what's going on.
I do have more of an intuition on certain players, not on Bam. I mean, not on Dedmon. I have more of one on Bam. But
I was digging a little deeper.
Okay,
let's not waste too much time on Dwayne Dedmon.
Okay, forgetting the total though, because I think that's just harder to figure out.
I took us on a tangent there. I just wanted.
It sometimes we'll have a good bet there, but in this case, I'm just not sure. So
all right, so this game overall is somewhat mediocre. I just wanted to kind of.
Well, I think if Bam plays, it's not mediocre. Like the Miami looks really good to me if Bam is in, and just something to call out that maybe people don't realize is that when a player is ruled out, books are a bit faster to remove lines, like get it off the board, compared to when a player is ruled in. They're still going to be pretty quick, but I think there's like less of an emergency that gets triggered when it's like, oh, Bam is active or Bam went through shoot around. Like we're going to get a slower move for that. So I'm sure that people who have watched this week have been like, wait, how do you guys bet that fast after the news happens? I think because the thing we're looking for is a player to be in, it'll be a little more of a grace period to be able to get a bet down. So I'm doing nothing here for now. And my move is basically if we get a positive indicator on Bam's status, I'm betting Miami as soon as we get one. Either goes through shoot around or upgraded to probable. I think either one would be a good enough sign. And also just based on what they said about him, like I think he banged his knee 2 games ago and they were just saying he was sore. That doesn't sound like something that's too serious. Like I think he's probably fine.
Sounds good. Okay, so the other 4 or 5 games on your screen all look pretty. I mean, maybe that Cavs-Hornets game. Is there anything you want to talk about with Jared Allen there?
No, because it's basically priced for Allen closer to doubtful right now. So if he gets ruled out, like I don't think we get the Hornets are plus 9.5. I don't think they fall much below like plus 9 or 8.5. And if Allen's in, sure, like there's a little bit of value on the Cleveland
I'll
side,
probably
but
not get there.
Yeah, it's pretty fringe because Allen is not that great, and I think they're just going to play Robin Lopez progressively less, and it's going to kind of mitigate the downside of not having Jared Allen. They can play Mobley and Kevin Love in the front court. But if Drew Holiday doesn't play, Philly looks semi-decent. Projected line 1.5, current line 1.5, and then if Holiday's out, we get a 3-point edge basically on the Sixers. But I think Holiday probably plays, so that one could be moot.
I think we expected him in last game, but he's been out a few now, so certainly something to keep an eye on there.
I think that's the national TV game tonight. I may have that wrong. I don't actually have a great idea. Like, when we're talking about rest, I think it's a big deal. The game's on national TV. When we're talking about an actual injury, though, it's not quite as important.
It's a game of incentives, right? And so the incentives are they like to put on their best product for these TV games. I think that might have meant he could have probably played last game, but maybe they sat that one out to make sure he was better for this one. I'm stretching, of course, a little bit, but yeah. I think that's well within the range of outcomes.
Yeah, it is an ESPN game, so at least that part is true. But last game was also a divisional game against Cleveland where, for standings purposes...
Yeah, we can't rule that as a not give your A game, so good points there.
So, I guess I lean towards Drew playing because he is still questionable despite not playing last game, but ultimately I have no idea. So, if he gets ruled out, I think Philly makes sense, but otherwise he had nothing to do there yet. But let's go to OKC Memphis because
absolutely. The next landing point is OKC Memphis. So what I'm a little disappointed in, I'm going to give a little Grizzlies piece here. Last year, we were both relatively on the Grizzlies, almost to the degree of the Celtics, not quite, and the reasons we were on them was because they had this really deep bench. Ja Morant's replacements were like pretty good in comparison to him, even though Morant's great. And we kind of lost a couple of those pieces in the offseason. So this team, like the edge that we had, I feel like is gone slightly.
Yep.
But there's still some pieces that are clearly undervalued. And now somehow this OKC team's getting overvalued. They're playing pretty good ball. You know, Shea complained recently, wanted traded, but now, you know, he's balling out. How are we playing this one? You know, I'm imagining we're going to be heavy on the Grizzlies, but is there anything to keep an eye on?
So I do want to mention that, I'm happy you brought up Memphis because this situation is one of the more interesting ones to talk about. One thing that's happened is Ja Morant is better now. Like, his performance, I think, in the playoffs specifically, compared to like the beginning of last season, it was very clear that he had made some tangible improvements. I think his 3-point shot got better, his shot selection got better.
Well, I got to practice with DeAnthony Melton. How could he not get better?
Right, for sure. DeAnthony Melton, who is, it's very sad he's not on this team. I mean, it's good for Philly, but Morant's defense also seemed to pick up in the playoffs, and I think that's carried over a bit. I mean, he's got a positive defensive rating now. He was a huge negative on defense in his rookie year, and he was still kind of a negative on defense last year. He won the Most Improved Player award, but that was mostly for his offense getting better. So
you won Most Improved Player last year? I didn't realize that.
I think he won it despite all the games he missed because all the other candidates also missed games. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure. I mean, I had money on it some way. I won or lost on Morant. I know I had him. I think he won. But Morant is better now. So even with Bane out, I think like the team is still very good because Morant is playing a lot better this year. And then they don't.
How does Dillon Brooks look in these ratings? He's grading a little more positive than I guess the industry sentiment is on a player like him.
People hate this guy, but he plays really good defense, and his offense. He's one of the. I think he's he's like the opposite of DeMar DeRozan, where he looks terrible, but his shots are actually okay. Like he I think is somewhat efficient in terms of the shots that he's shooting. He just shoots too much, and his shot kind of looks ugly, and he's not a very likable player.
He has that selfish like reputation about him.
Absolutely. Like everything about him feels bad, but overall I think he's like an average offensive player. And his defense is really good, so, he's a positive. Like, the Grizzlies are smart. They're playing him for a reason. They did play Zaire Williams a bunch last year, so although he has a positive rating now, he's out of the lineup. So they may know things that we don't know. But this team is constructed very differently compared to last year. There's no DeAnthony Melton. They're missing a lot of depth in general. Jaren Jackson came back just now, but Desmond Bane is now hurt. So they're a pretty thin rotation. Tyus Jones is still there off the bench, but like not having Morant is a way bigger deal now if he were to miss a game compared to what it was last year.
Right.
So it's just kind of a different dynamic. But I also think Morant is just better. The Grizzlies are clearly a very good team. And I'll go back to the main page because we should talk about Shea, who now is minus odds for Most Improved Player of the Year after being like 7-1 about a week ago.
How do you feel about that? My immediate reaction is to fade that.
I think at this price, I'm fading it. I bet him at like plus 130 after the game winner against Washington, but not for a ton. Like, I don't think it's, some crazy. He's not a lock.
Maybe I'm crazy, but I've clearly not studied that market very much. Let me just start there. My immediate reaction is, how are these guys candidates for being most improved? Where what did they go from the 17th best player in the league to like the 10th? Is that the
Shea wasn't considered that level before. Like first time All-Star is a really big variable, I think. He will certainly be one of those this year. Like
he wasn't on the All-Star team yet?
I don't think so. And I think the same was true for Morant last year.
Like, to me, Lauri Markkanen is the guy for most improved that makes sense to me, right?
He's number two. He's number two in betting odds.
It's like, that's a guy that he was whatever, super not like he's like a bench player that's like whatever, but now he's like a relevant piece on a team that's overperforming. That's the type of player that made sense to me to be committed to that word. I didn't even think Morant would be like. I didn't even think he'd have a price.
It's kind of shifted now where it's gone from like irrelevant to pretty good, or even like average to very good, where now like that award goes more to the guy who goes from good to great. Like that is becoming, it seems like the trend. It's not written anywhere, but yeah, SGA certainly fits that. He's gone from good to great this year.
I just feel like I was paying $10,000 for him in DraftKings all last year. Like,
I mean, he's put up fantasy numbers because of the team he's on, but he like his efficiency. I mean, he's putting up even bigger numbers. I mean, he's scored like 35 plus a bunch of times this year already. So all of that for today's purposes, I guess it adds up to two things. I have a manual bump on OKC for a point just because like they. I mean, SGA has a really good player rating now.
You're saying they might be better than the math is saying.
Yeah.
And you're protecting yourself a little bit. That's what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, because last year SGA was worth like 1.5 for 48 minutes. Now he's up to a 2.9. I think he could be like a 4. Like he's playing at like a 5 or 6 level, which is probably unsustainable. But him specifically might be a point better than the ratings think. So I have that in there manually, but despite that, I mean, Memphis is a way better team than the Thunder, and even without Desmond Bane, like them only getting 2.5 points for home court. So with a line of 6, we're assuming they're only 3.5 points better than the Thunder on a neutral court. Like that is wild. The Thunder are not a playoff contender. I know that some people may think they could like sneak into the playoffs now. They're playing so far over their heads, and Memphis is like a legit championship contender that, yes, they're without Desmond Bane right now, but they're still very good even without him playing, and Jaren Jackson's back. So I really like this one. I don't bet timing here is a little interesting. So
yeah, I was gonna ask, is there anything to get creative with here? Like, it's only a 6-point spread right now that I'm seeing. 4.5 points off of your projected line is a pretty big edge.
Yeah.
I'm planning to drop some hammers today, but is there a timing thing? What are you thinking here?
The timing thing, so it depends. The answer to this question almost always is how diligent and how available are you going to be at your computer? Because what you can do is stare at, whatever odds screen you pick. I use the Sports Insights one mostly. You could use the unabated one. You use whatever. And if the line starts to tick up to 6.5, you just bet the 6. But it could fall to 5.5 because I think OKC is a very public bet today. I think there's the SGA versus Ja thing, like last year's most improved versus this year's most improved, 2 young superstars who are clearly getting better. I think if most people look at that game, they want to root for a high scoring close game here. I think a lot of casual bettors are on the Thunder to cover this. So, and especially with the run they've been on lately, they beat the Wizards on the road, they beat the Knicks on the road, they almost beat the Celtics on the road. That was an NBA TV game that a lot of people probably watched. That Celtics game was annoying. Yeah, they should have won by a lot. But yeah, I think a lot of people want to bet the Thunder here. So would I be shocked if this line fell to 5.5? No, not really. So for now, I have a 1-unit bet in at -6. I think this is good enough to be a 2-unit spot, and the second half of my bet is either going to come at 5.5 or 6. If it starts to tick up, I'll try to find the 6 that I can, and if it goes to 5.5, I'll just take it there. I'd be really surprised if it falls a whole point, though. So
so that's actually just if you see it go to 5, I would then recheck news. I would make sure that there wasn't, somebody's question, like Steven Adams is questionable all of a sudden, right? Like
that's a good point.
I don't even know if he's worth anything, right? But if it moves a full point, then maybe that's the time you need. Okay, what am I missing here?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So like half a point is within the range of just like the public is kind of skewing it.
To move it that
a full point is like something's happening. Yeah, I think that's well said. So that kind of covers where I'm at there. Like it's a really good bet, and if you're not going to be around today, maybe just take it now. But if you're going to be around, like you can try to kind of like play the game where you try to get the most optimal line you can find.
Sounds good. Anything else you want to touch on in that game? Is there any other Thunder players other than SGA that matter? I'm pretty sure the answer is no. Mostly.
Yeah, I think the answer is no. There are a couple guys that would be worth like 1 point. Lou Dort is still like their only good defensive player.
Giddey passes the eye test, but I understand his math isn't there yet.
He is wildly inconsistent. I mean, we could argue that I should be giving 2 points of a manual bump to OKC because Giddey is just rated so poorly, and like
that feels like a bad rating. If you had to put him in the category of other players with that rating, I feel like he is going to be outclass a lot of them. But
he certainly looks better than all of them, but. We've seen
I'm
games
sure he has
where,
flaws that I'm not aware of also.
Yeah, he's not playing defense really, except I mean even these recent OKC games, they've been massively high scoring. Like the defense is still terrible. They're just making all their threes. Isaiah Joe is actually semi good. Mike G loves
him. Isaiah Joe. He's like the king of the Isaiah Joe fan club.
shout out to the Isaiah Joe. Joe crew. I always thought they should have got some more time with the Sixers.
I think he'll
be another one we were letting go.
So I think you're all right.
Yeah, Melton's great defensively, but I always thought Joe could be a guy that would be the heat check guy off the bench.
I think it's time to move to our suddenly new favorite West Coast team.
Oh man. Okay.
Is it time, or is there anything else you'd like to touch on?
We'll do that first. We can come back to Utah after.
Okay. So
all right, here we go.
It is time to discuss the Los Angeles Lakers. We were Clippers fans recently. The Crypto.com arena might be going down in name soon, so be wary of that. But this Lakers team is great today. It's almost as if, like, I remember distinctly how ahead of the market you were on the Lakers being bad. And I was such a LeBron homer at the time that I was just like, I just need to see it, right? I don't doubt you, but I need to see it. And then you were way ahead of that. They got really, really bad really quickly. Have been bad for a little while now. And is the market overcorrecting here? I feel like we've gotten a couple really good Lakers lines recently. What are your thoughts here?
Okay, so first of all, the Lakers should have a -1 here, just to scale this back for the. I was not anticipating having to do this for the Lakers, but the end of game backdoor cover garbage time scenario. So we're gonna do that.
Yes, the spread being all the way at 7, we got to be a little bit careful that LeBron doesn't bring his A game in the fourth quarter.
Yeah. So okay, that aside, we still have a projected edge here that's pretty significant, and it'll go up when we get Alec Burks resting because he's not playing back-to-backs. I mean, I'm pretty sure about that. So yeah, the Lakers were.
So the best player on the Pistons, Alex Burks, you think is sitting?
Yeah.
And he's not going to play the back-to-back. And so you expect this current, 10.6 to move even more.
Yeah, we're going to be looking at like a 12. I mean, we don't know for sure LeBron is playing, but it really sounds like he's playing.
There's clearly always a chance we get the 80 doesn't participate in shoot-arounds update. There's always a chance that LeBron takes it. There's always a chance of that. So I actually don't know that I actually don't know that this line would move against us throughout the day, unless we get bad news.
Yeah, I mean, the news has been so positive. I think part of what's going on here is the books don't realize how likely LeBron is to play because he's listed questionable. But the Lakers had practice yesterday. Dennis Schroeder looks like he's in. Thomas Bryant is terrible. I don't know if he'll get minutes, but whatever, he's active. And LeBron also was back at practice. I think had a full practice.
Thomas Bryant. I hope he puts some solid minutes.
He should not start at center for anybody, but he has talent maybe someday, just not now. He was really bad on the
He's
Wizards.
no DeAndre Jordan.
He's not that. He's not DeAndre Jordan, Robin Lopez, or the one guy who is worse than those players who gets a couple minutes like once a month is Udonis Haslem. That's the only
coach.
Yeah, he's
a coach,
basically
man.
a coach.
That doesn't count.
He's going to play like 18 minutes this entire year. He's the one guy who's worse than both of those players. But anyway, Thomas Bryant is not that level. He's just really young and doesn't really, understand defensive positioning yet. And he shoots threes like Isaiah Stewart, basically. But
thank God.
I think when shout out to he's over here. When LeBron gets ruled in for this game, which I think is very, very, very likely, we're going to see the line get up to like 8 or 9. I think that's probably going to happen.
Okay, so you think this line has LeBron questionable with it's shaded towards him being out more often than you're projecting. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. I think it's different from the Memphis situation where I think that is just a public loves the Thunder thing because the Thunder are on this crazy hot streak and SGA is like everyone's favorite player right now. With Lakers Pistons, though, I think we have the LeBron return underaccounted for by the odds makers.
Gotcha.
And
which, interestingly enough, LeBron's value is slipping quite a bit as the years go by.
Yeah,
but
his player rating is lower than Alec Burks. That is just a crazy thing to have on the screen right now. I didn't realize.
I mean, sometimes I wonder if all this math is worth it. If that's the conclusion we're coming to.
Have you seen LeBron play this year?
To swallow sometimes.
Have you seen LeBron play this year though?
He's obviously a shell of his former self. I'm not arguing that at all.
No, I question this too. I mean, that looks wild, but. Alec Burks single-handedly almost pulled off a backdoor cover for the Pistons at Madison Square Garden. I'm sure it was a revenge game. Maybe he played like a little better than normal, but he was the only reason that game was close for Detroit. He's like by far their most efficient scorer.
He's like, Tibbs, you want to play me 42 minutes tonight, buddy?
There was probably some stuff happening that we're not aware of, but Burks matters. I don't think he's going to play, and this line already assumes he's in, so we could get even more value on the Lakers, but the Lakers rotation also with Schroeder back, like I don't know how he's gonna look, but he has to be an upgrade over the guys that we're playing. Like
I think Schroeder's a very reasonable piece. I mean, obviously he's not like mega elite, but a lot of these guys I've never heard of. Matt Ryan, for example, these guys are pretty rough.
We've got a Schroeder player rating here of -1, but that is substantially better than the guys he's taking the 15-20 minutes from. Like, it's just the reason the Lakers are so bad and not just average is because
Scottie Pippen Jr.'s on this team.
I think he just got sent out of the G League. Actually, sorry for him, but yeah, he's on this roster.
He's on Team LeBron.
Yeah, but like Troy Brown and Kendrick Nunn, like these are. Especially Kendrick Nunn, who's been like the worst player in the NBA this year. To go from him to Dennis Schroeder is a huge upgrade, actually, even though Schroeder is a negative. Now we don't have to play Russell Westbrook quite as many minutes, who, is
more of a negative than
to his
credit by a lot.
Yeah, to his credit, he's playing better, but he's still like wildly inefficient and doesn't play any defense. So, yeah, LeBron at 1.2, like he's not the player he used to be, but he's still the second best player on this team after Anthony Davis. So he's very important. I think he plays. I think the Pistons not having Burks tonight most likely is a big deal. It's a back-to-back for them. They don't have to travel, but it's still 2 games in a row. Their starters had to play relatively heavy minutes in
it's not impossible that Detroit sits random people on a night like this, right?
Right, like Bojan Bogdanovic, does he have to play tonight?
He's a perfect guy that he just like might get the night off. For whatever reason, right?
I don't think Corey Joseph played last night. He's not especially good anyway, though. But he could play in place of guys who played last night. I think that would make sense for them. I don't think Jaden Ivey is sitting. But, like, Cade Cunningham's already out. Isaiah Stewart, who is not good, but is, for this team, is semi-important. He's out. This is a really, really bad version of Detroit if Burks is not playing. So, in terms of bet timing, I think even though it's a different situation than Memphis, I'm treating it sort of the same. Like, I have the Lakers now, and then as news starts to fall, I'm going to just add more to the Lakers.
Hey, I'm just recording, guys, for posterity. November 18th, 2022 is the Alec Burks Memorial Over Mentions podcast. I think we hit 12 Alec Burks mentions. So just want to make sure we noted that before we move on.
Hey, we don't care. We don't care what the name is. We just care how important they are. So.
Understood. Yep. Shout out to Mama Burks. I'm sure she's very proud.
This is a great day for her.
All right, so with that in mind, let's go to the other favorite topic of this show: the Utah Jazz. Current projected spread 2-point underdogs facing the Suns. You seem to love you some Jazz. What do you got here? What's the latest you got on Chris Paul?
I don't know if Chris Paul is going to play, but the line here with Utah projected favored includes Chris Paul playing. This seems like this is the best Jazz spot we've had in a while. The reason for it is they're on a 3-game losing streak, and Phoenix just beat the Warriors on ESPN on Wednesday night. And the Suns have looked really good lately, but their current roster is nowhere near what it normally is with Jay Crowder not playing.
Their bench is a lot thinner than it's been in the last couple of years.
Because Cameron Johnson's out too, so they're not playing Jay Crowder until they trade him and bring someone back. That's like a semi-important player. Cameron Johnson was playing really, really well this year before he got hurt. And if you take Chris Paul out, that estimate for Chris Paul, actually, if I had to guess, I may end up bumping that to like 3 or 3.5. Just remembering in my head what it actually moved for the Warriors game, because that's an estimate. Like, I don't know what their starting lineup is going to be yet, or what their rotation exactly will look like. It's different for different matchups. Bismack Biyombo plays when the other team has Rudy Gobert, but when the other team has Kelly Olynyk at center, maybe they don't use him. So it's
Doc
kind of
Landale goes a little more there, I think.
Yeah, and he's not. I mean, he's playing well, but I don't think he's especially.
That's not a reliable piece of a rotation.
No. So I think Phoenix is on a hot streak. Utah's on a cold streak. For the first time this year, Utah's on a cold streak. So we're kind of getting a buy low on the Jazz. I mean, just to give context to like all the stuff we've said about Utah and like how they're great, their team rating is 2.3. Like, they're not amazing. They're a bit above average, which is just so much better than everyone else thought.
Yeah, they're just mediocre, not a bottom 3 team, right?
Yeah, they're like the 12th or 13th. If the market
continuously prices them as a bottom 5 team, then unfortunately we're going to be there. Just like in baseball, we got to bet on the Royals and the Tigers sometimes, right?
Yeah.
This is the reality of how sports trading goes.
Yeah, I mean, we're betting on the Lakers, so. But yeah, the Jazz are probably somewhere between the 10th and 15th best team in the NBA right now. And the Suns without Chris Paul are in the same category. Like, if he's not playing, they're basically even teams. And then the games in Utah where they have had a couple days off now, no travel. Their last game was a home game. Phoenix is coming in. Utah is like, I think part of the reason the Jazz have done so well this year, that's like a pretty difficult place to go into. I think they traditionally have one of the higher home court advantages. And the Suns just played a somewhat taxing game against the Warriors 2 nights ago. And then,
so you're calling for a letdown game? I'm just kidding. Obviously, I'm not.
I wouldn't use those terms, but well, no, but it's true. Like, shorter rest for them than the Jazz have, and they're traveling. And if Chris Paul does play his minutes, I think part of the reason the projected line looks like this is because Chris Paul playing is probably on some kind of minute restriction. He has a heel injury. That feels
so like 18 to 22 minutes. You think
that feels like the kind of injury where it could get like more sore throughout the game? With like a finger injury or coming back from illness. Like, sometimes it's different, but like with a lower body injury, usually you want to manage minutes when the guy comes back. And then I already have a -1 there for Utah. I'm already downgrading them. Maybe
you're just in case the model's too high on them.
Yeah. So this one feels really good. Utah is +2 right now, 1.5 to 2.
I see.
So this is a bit different than both Memphis and the Lakers, where we actually have a significant questionable player on the other side. I mean, if Chris Paul's not playing, this is the biggest bet of the day, because Utah goes to like projected -3 when they're 2-point underdogs. You can get them like +110, 115 on the money line, and they're supposed to win. If Paul plays, though, this is okay. So rather than going like 1 unit now, 1 unit later, this could be like half unit now and then up to 2.5 units later. Yeah, this is like kind of good now, but not great, or amazing later.
This feels like a half unit now and maybe 3 total units later.
Yeah, that sounds perfectly reasonable. The Jazz are going to be good either way, but it's not that exciting unless Chris Paul doesn't play. Or, we get the scenario where he's ruled in, and then we get a line bumping up to like 3.5.
Yeah, that's the other thing here. So if Paul is confirmed in and we get some live movement, then we want to be able to get a little more on the other side.
I just want to see here what we have for Chris Paul's minutes because...
Yeah, that's a good idea to check.
It might only be like he's projected 30 minutes. Like that seems high.
There's a lot of downside that you could bake into that.
Yeah. I would think if he plays, it's like 24 to 27.
He certainly could play those minutes. I would just, as described, if everything checks out, I would be a little surprised if he gets the full 30.
Yeah. I mean, I thought he would return versus the Warriors, and the fact that he didn't play that game, which Golden State is the most important team for Phoenix to beat for the division, for the top of the Western Conference. I think they seem to care a lot about beating the Warriors. Like, if you watched any of that game, Mikal Bridges shouting at Klay Thompson and making fun of him on the bench after hitting threes. Like, there's a rivalry there, and that was an ESPN game. So Chris Paul not playing in that one at all, I think, is a sort of bad indicator for his health right now. Like, you don't... If there was a game to just
he had to miss that game.
Yeah.
Right? He couldn't play through it.
If that was if the prior game he had just missed was like a game, if it was just the game in Orlando, which was
a home game at Detroit or whatever,
then you'd be like, well, they're just saving him for a better game to return for. But if he didn't play that one, like, I think it speaks to how much pain or soreness or lack of mobility he's currently dealing with. So this feels like one where we say 60-40 he's out, but I don't really know.
Hey, Chris Paul, I can barely get out of bed, and we're about the same age. So the fact that you can go play basketball is mighty impressive. Don't want to ding you too hard, but hey, these kids are young out there, man. Let's act accordingly. Yeah. So anything else on this game we want to touch on? How do you feel about the slate as a whole at this point? Is there anything in the back of your mind? Unsaid? Any of these, like Zion and Marcus Smart questionable? You want to get in the Boston game a little bit?
Just neither player there is close to as important as people think. Maybe it's just worth mentioning that very quickly. Like, Zion plays close to no defense, and he's not as efficient on offense as I think most people think he is. He's worth like a point. Like, he's good, but the idea that he was the most bet player for MVP this season across sportsbooks, like, that's just madness. And the odds weren't even that high. He was like 25-1 coming into the year, and he was the most bet on player for MVP this season. So Zion is not that level yet. Development later, whatever. But
I think that's a super reasonable bet. I'm not saying I don't have it, but
how is he going to win that?
It's easy to think of a 1 in 25 scenario where this guy becomes the best player in the league. Like, I think that's super reasonable.
Yeah, but like Jason Tatum was 15-1. I just don't in comparison. I see what you're like. He could have come out this year and just been like, the next
match
version
the hype,
of him.
Right? Like, clearly he had hype. He had plenty of flashes of brilliance at various points. Maybe he was able to put it all together. I think, I don't think that's as bad as you're necessarily saying.
It looks really bad now, but
no argument here.
But the thing for Marcus Smart, and he actually might be closer to half a point than a point, even though his rating is a 1.6.
That surprises me a little bit.
It's because the backup.
Is he just so bad offensively?
Why his rating is that low?
Yeah,
he's not as good at defense as you would think based on him winning Defensive Player
of the Year. So the media
got
got him that stupid thing.
Yeah. Defensive Player of the Year is a very media-based, narrative-based award, it seems. Smart has he only has a 0.3 rating on defense right there. I'm surprised it's that low. I thought it was a bit better. But part of the reason his defense looks so good is because everyone on the Celtics plays great defense. Like, they make it really easy for him. He does guard the other team's best player a lot, but, if he gets beat, you have Al Horford and, not this year, but Robert Williams will be back there, or you have, rotation from Tatum and Brown. Like, these guys all play good defense, so it's just kind of easier on everybody. I think there's only a couple of negative defensive players on this whole team, but Peyton Pritchard overall is good, and going from taking Smart's minutes and splitting them up amongst Derek White, who is better than Marcus Smart, and then Pritchard, who is worse, but he's still pretty good. The Celtics don't lose a lot when Smart doesn't play. And it doesn't even, from looking at this, like, you're not getting even, an over or under bump from this. Smart is actually pretty good offensively. And Derek White is rated higher than Smart on defense. So I don't think we want to look into this game too much. Like, Marcus Smart doesn't really matter. Zion being out definitely helps the under, but I think that that's kind of baked in already and probably something that I just stay away from. But I think that those two are interesting just to talk about.
Sounds good. Another big slate on Friday. Appreciate all the breakdown. I think we're kind of heading towards a wrap up here. Current odds on Zion MVP 50-1. Not interested.
No.
Jokic 24-1 right now.
That's much more appealing.
Media. I agree with you. He's probably got the media against him running 3 in a row. Embiid 10-1, pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think let's do like a minute or two on MVP before we wrap.
Yeah, sure.
Last year there was a thing where DeMar DeRozan got himself to like 8-1 or 10-1, playing at his absolute ceiling, like above his ceiling. Like, it was impossible.
So
what he
he's
was
Shea,
doing.
is what you're saying. He's doing what Shea's doing right now.
Shea, kind of, but I'm actually using DeRozan.
Shea's decent though.
I'm comparing DeRozan last year more to like Curry and Embiid actually, because Curry and Embiid are both playing like as well as they can possibly play, and we're still only seeing them in the 10 to 12-1 range. Like, I don't think those guys really have much chance of winning this year.
Curry and Embiid, you said?
Yeah, because if this is all they can get to, given like their exceedingly...
So they're just boring? Is that the idea? They're just like boring picks?
I think what more of what I'm saying is I expect the production for both of those guys to drop off. Like, if the season ended now, I think they'd get votes and they'd be deserving for some votes, but Embiid is so injury prone, and Curry's just shooting at a level that... I mean, this happened last year with Curry. Even before he got hurt, his production just started. Like, he was so good at the very beginning, and then his production just started dropping.
A guy like that, I think age would have to hit him a little sooner than other players, right? Like, his off-ball movement, where, like, he's, like, always running, right? Like, he just doesn't take a play off. He's always moving. He's impossible to defend. There's got to be, like, a little bit of a drop-off at some point, right?
Yeah, and he hasn't had it yet, but I think it'll happen.
But shooting can stay consistent,
year.
too. Like, as you get older, you can still, like, stay as a good shooter, though, so it's a little...
Yeah, they do some stuff now, though, with Jordan Poole running the offense, where some of Curry's activity, it's not as much in terms of handling the ball. So, yeah, he's still, as he gets older, he still runs around screens and things like that, which may drop off. But his ball handling responsibilities aren't nearly as much. So that's can keep him kind of stable in terms of up there among the elite players. I think for MVP, a lot is how the team's doing as well.
Yeah.
Like, Embiid's never going to win if the Sixers are 500. I mean, it doesn't matter what he does. I mean, if he puts up 56, 10, 7, and 7 like he did the other night, sure. But, beyond anything like that, then, and even same thing with Curry. Curry's not going to win MVP if the Warriors are underperforming.
They're 6-10 right now? Yeah, 6-9.
Is that accurate? Wow.
6-9. Yeah, so for Embiid, he basically would have to sustain this production with the Sixers winning. And I don't think that's even possible because when James Harden comes back, his numbers are going to go down. So they may win more, but his numbers will fall. And then for Curry is at a career high in basically every statistical category right now. And the point there is not so much that I think he's going to like get super fatigued. I think he's just going to regress to the mean because he's never been this good before. Like, he's just playing great, but it's been 14 games. And he's not going to shoot 53% from the field when most years he's like... I mean, last year he shot 44% from the field. His career average is 47.5. He's shooting 45% from 3, which is like right in line with his career high. And he's doing it on like the highest shooting volume he's ever had. So I just think it's a regression to the mean. I don't think it's as much like he's going to wear down. But it might be a little of that too. It's just the other guys also who are at the top right now... And I think Giannis is a little different, but like Luka and Tatum they've never been MVPs before, right? Luka hasn't won one, I don't think.
No, he hasn't, and Tatum hasn't either.
Tatum certainly, like I think the media is going to want to give it to Tatum, I think he's just really well liked. And I think Luka is just too good to ignore. And I think Giannis falls back to number 3 some point soon. So I think like a bunch of these guys start to fall back, and we sort of wind up looking at a 2-man race between Luka and Tatum, with Giannis still like being in it. But like I think there's a bit of voter fatigue there, and Milwaukee. Part of why Giannis emerged as the favorite before is Milwaukee was 10-0 or 9-0.
Yeah, they started off pretty hot.
Yeah, now they've got
11-3 now.
3 losses. Yeah, I mean, the Giannis MVP thing was more about the team record than his numbers. I think for someone like Giannis or Jokic to win, they would have to like dramatically surpass career best performances. It's just so much harder for them. Whereas like I think people want Luka or Tatum, and especially Tatum, to win it. So like for Curry and Embiid, Curry basically would have to do something like this the whole year with the Warriors being good, and same for Embiid. So I think like I still probably think both Luka and Tatum, even though they're at their floor for where their odds have been all year, plus 250 and plus 500 roughly. I like both of them. I think there's value on both of them still.
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't throw Giannis out just because of the defensive side. I mean, he's probably going to win Defensive Player of the Year again this year. So when it comes down to the last looks at MVP, the whole two-way player thing comes up. Tatum is much better this year than he was in the past. Luke is better, which isn't that difficult because he was just terrible defensively in the past. But anyway, when it gets down to the end, if Giannis is in that final conversation, just another dominant defensive year could push him.
Yeah,
700 on Tatum you just found?
Yeah, I like that for sure. I don't think Giannis is out of it. I just think he's number 3 right now. And he's priced at, tied for first. I think Tatum is ahead of him.
Yeah, looking at those prices, Tatum looks to be the best value.
And other sites have him at like 450, 500. That's why I pulled up FanDuel, is because I know he's 700 there. Yeah,
I'm sure you know quite well where the 700.
Yeah, this is the best odds that exist on Tatum right now. And then like Jokic at 33-1 is not dead, but I wouldn't bet him yet. He's out for COVID right now. He's going to need to put up like a crazy run, but he's certainly capable. It's just there's no one down here. Shea has actually gotten to 55. He's tied with Zion. Who would have thought? He was like 150-1, 3 days ago or something. But yeah, this.
All right.
This is the one.
I think that's going to wrap it up for today's NBA betting strategy show with Preaching Sense. My name is Mike. I'm here with Matt and Mike G. Thanks for tuning in. Any closing thoughts on the way out, Matt?
I think we got to a lot of stuff.
All right. Thanks for tuning in. Looking forward to continuing the grind.